Experiences with Conley here, Senior Interview Coach at Interview Skills Clinic. In this video, which is part 2, I am going to be sharing 6 further tips to try and help you answer STAR interview questions. So the STAR is used for competency, behaviour and value-based questions, and I know most of you are already going to be familiar with the STAR method. The challenge, of course, is actually not just knowing it, it's about how to apply it in a way that's going to promote yourself in an interview against other candidates. Now, very quickly, for those of you who haven't watched part 1 and who are not familiar with STAR, it is simply a structure, it's an acronym to help candidates share examples to support answers in competency, behaviour and value-based interviews. Now, STAR stands for the situation, the task, the action and the result. All right, do go back and have a look at part 1. I'll share a link in the video below. But for now, let's move on to tip 7. Where possible, choose examples which are relevant to the role as possible so that it demonstrates your skill to get up to speed quickly in the role and to help the hiring manager visualize you in the role. Now, this may not, of course, be possible if you are applying for a role where it's a role that you haven't done before and you're relying on your transferable skills. Then just really be mindful of this. You are going to be against candidates who are likely to have more precise experience. So it's important when you're sharing examples to probably at the end, I would do it in the results, to talk a little bit about why you're sharing this example and why it's relevant to the role that you're going for. So you could either do it actually at the situation or in the result, but just help the hiring manager visualize you in the role by drawing out your transferable skills. Because if you share examples which may be very behaviour focused, by that I mean influencing skills, collaboration, but if they can't visualize what you're describing is very different to the role, sometimes it's difficult for them to make that connection. So just be aware of that. Tip 8. Try and share more recent examples. Anything over 5 years ago is generally seen as dated. Chances are you're likely to have been in a more junior role yourself. But actually the reality is it's really tough to try to remember what you did 5 years ago. If you are going to share an old example, try and tell them why you're sharing it. And an example of that would be, for example, if you are applying for an internal role and you are going to be asked questions about having a difficult conversation or dealing with conflict or any sensitive based question really, where if you were to share an example from your organisation, the chances are that the hiring manager of the other side of the table is going to know exactly who you're talking about. That's awkward. And it's going to make people feel uncomfortable. And I think there's a whole issue of actually confidentiality. So I would share examples based on another organisation, and I might actually say to the interviewer, in this particular case, I'm going to be using an example based from my previous organisation because it's a sensitive example and I'm mindful of confidentiality and not sharing examples internally. And that's going to go down quite well because it shows that you've got strong interpersonal skills. You're thinking about other people rather than yourself, even when you're in an interview. So just have a think about that. But generally, otherwise, share more recent examples because that's going to be better. So tip 9, remember the interview's about you. You are being assessed on your behaviour, your performance, not others. So therefore, you need the example needs to be about you. Now, everybody, I think, knows. Most people know that it's better to be using the I when you're talking about your examples. But I know from experience that most people start with I and then they sort of drift over to we. And there are a number of reasons for this. Firstly, The reality is that most people don't deliver something literally on their own, that other people are involved, and therefore they don't want to take credit for work that they didn't do. And that's perfectly acceptable. So just make sure that you sort of say, I was delivering this, or I was working with a group of 5 and my role in this was this. And so let me talk about what I did and how I shared with others, and actually I got information from other people in my team. So you just need to make it clear that they're still only interested really in what you did and how you interacted with others, and what your thoughts were, and etc. The other example, of course, is if you're leading a team, you may not have delivered it. You might have set the vision for it. You might have put the process in place. You might have removed some of the issues and barriers, and you might have motivated the team to deliver it. It still needs to be about you, but delivering through others, okay? Rather than, and I think sometimes people feel like could get a little bit confused about that. So that's something I think that you can think about. The other point I want to make, which is tip 10, is this idea that STAR acronym doesn't mean to say that the STAR structure cannot be used differently at different levels. What I tend to see is that people at quite senior levels are trying to use the STAR in a very similar way to how they hear the STAR being used when they are interviewing candidates themselves, which of course is perfectly natural. But in fact, sometimes the issue with that is they'll get feedback that they haven't really demonstrated their leadership skills within the interview. So please be aware that the STAR is just an acronym, it's a structure, but how you interpret that is different depending on the level that you're applying for. At a more senior level, I would expect much greater complexity, much more strategic thinking to demonstrate, obviously delivering through others, but much more challenge within your example. Tip 11 is that people try to include the result. So what tends to happen is people run out of steam. So they feel they've actually been talking far too long, and they think they're just boring, the hiring managers, or they can see people looking at their watch even, but they get the sense that they've been talking for too long. So they just stop very abruptly. The danger of this, you might have been talking for too long, but you might not have been. But you could, by missing out the result, you could be losing 10% of your marks. Depending on your level, the result can include, obviously, the result itself, but it can also include the wider strategic result. It can include the relevance for the role that we've just talked about earlier, but it could also include reflection. So it could include, what do I think I did particularly well here? What did I learn in the process? So lots goes into the result to pick up those marks. And unless you're at more entry level or junior level roles, just talking about your result is often not enough to get that 10%. It is at more junior levels, but not at more senior levels. So please be mindful of that. Tip 12, please keep your answers brief. An example shouldn't be a presentation. 2 to 4 minutes is absolutely fine. This, of course, depends on your grade. It depends on the sector that you're applying to, and it depends on the organisation you apply to. If you are applying for an internal role, you've got a great advantage. Go and find somebody and just ask them, how long are they expecting you to talk for? This role is very important to you and you want to make sure you do really well in the interview, and they will tell you. It may surprise you to know that every organisation is actually different. There's a sort of an expectation. Network Rail, for example, expect only 1 minute answers, which is incredibly short. And then they ask, in fact, a series of follow-up questions which dive deeper into the example that you have shared in the first place. So they might have 5 questions as follow-up questions, whereas the civil service would expect a 3 to 5 minute answer, and they may not ask you any questions at all to follow up. So I've covered a lot here, particularly with part 1 and part 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1, it might be worth going back and having listened to it, and just check out that how you are preparing for your interviews, you're doing it in a way that's really going to maximise your marks. If you have any questions, please do add them below. I do try to answer them. And of course, if you want any coaching, you can book a free consultation to discuss coaching from the link below. Try to remember to send us your CV and job specification, because that helps us gauge what coaching is best for you. Please share and like this video. And if you've got an interview coming up, good luck with the interview.